Today's year-end review episode, we're going to dive into the books that I read this year. How many books, why I tracked what I was reading this year, themes I didn't expect, and some of the highlights, books you might want to add to your bookshelf headed into the new year. Let's dive in to this year's year in review.
Welcome to the New Generation Leader Podcast. We're giving you the tools you need to lead in the digital world. Ready to reach your true potential? This is the New Generation Leader Podcast.
Longtime listeners to the show are going to know that I review the year. At the end of the year, I set aside a half a day, a morning, sometimes a full day, and take a look back over the year. Going back to last year, one of the things I recognized was as much as I've become a reader as an adult, I only read 6 books in 2024. 6. I can almost count that on one hand, 2 hands. But still, that's not a lot of books, especially for me. I've read a lot over my adult years, not so much in school, didn't enjoy academic books. But once I got into books that I was interested in reading, I really dove in and read a lot. Last year was a sobering number. And so headed into this year, I thought, you know what? I'm going to set an audacious goal. Now, this sounds a little outlandish, but I said, you know what? I think I can read a book a week. I honestly don't remember when I set this goal. I didn't set it when I did my annual year-end reflection retreat last year. It may have happened sometime in the first couple days of the new year when I started reading the first book on the list, Slow Productivity by Cal Newport. And something just clicked as I was reading Slow Productivity. Number one, slowness, slowing down to speed up, slowing down to be more intentional, which is a word we use a lot in our client work, but also being productive. How do we slow down yet also be more productive? Well, it takes being intentional. It takes setting aside time, the right time for people, the right time for relationships, and the right time for productivity. Diving into Cal's book, it's actually one of the most memorable books. I don't know if it was because it was the first one, but there was so much in Slow Productivity as Cal lays out some of the psychological brain side of productivity, of our workload, and he quoted a lot. Now, Cal's an academic. He's a professor, a university professor in computer science. He is a smart guy. So he's going to quote other authors. He's going to quote other books. And so what that did out of Slow Productivity was he referenced other books that I then added to my list. And so 2 things happened around that habit. Number one, all of a sudden I had new books to read, new books I was interested in checking out, diving into. So I checked them out from the library, or I added them to my list of books to read, and I created a note. In my notes app, I created a 2025 books note. At the top was the books I read. At the bottom was the books I was interested in reading next. And so all throughout the year, whether it was in a newspaper article, podcast episode, or a footnote like in Slow Productivity, I kept adding books to that list to be read. And so I developed that discipline, and I am excited to say I read more than 6 books this year. Actually, at last count, and we are still 12 days from the end of the year, I have read 61 books. I far surpassed the 1 book a week. I finished almost all of them. A handful I intentionally did not finish, and there are only a small handful that I listened to instead of reading. Some of these I had on hand, a handful, small handful I bought. Most of them I was able to check out from the county library, which did save me a good bit of money this year. So let's dive in. A couple of the insights and takeaways. I'm going to hit the highlights. I'm not going to describe all 61 books that I've read so far this year, but I will drop a whole chart with summaries and links if you want to check out any of these books in the show notes. So, again, top of the list, slow productivity. There's so much about your mindset and approach to work. And I followed up reading Slow Productivity by reading Cal's well known earlier book, Deep Work. And so the combination of those two, thinking about how we set our attention on our workload, our goals, our tasks, and stay focused on those. Those were pivotal and important insights and takeaways that I've really retained throughout the year. Followed up Slow Productivity with Hidden Potential, Adam Grant's new book. Uh, those those two authors are really insightful, helped me paint a picture. Now we turn a corner and you see, I didn't just read about leadership or culture or strategy. Third book on the list, I thought, JD Vance is well known for Hillbilly Elegy. He's now in the White House. Let me read this book. And that was one of the first biographies, memoirs, personal stories that I read. The themes, 25% of the books I read were leadership books. I think that's kind of a given based on the kind of work I do. 15% were sales books. We'll get to that sales thread here in a minute. Culture was definitely more impactful than strategy. But actually, the one other interesting part that I noted in counting up all these books is 8% of books were fiction, 7% were memoirs. So 15% were in the realm of not direct learning, not business or leadership books, but were a change of pace, a change of rhythm, something to take my mind off. There's an intentionality there as well that in slow productivity, don't keep pushing. Take your foot off the pedal. It's funny to think about slow productivity and reading 61 books. There's nothing slow about reading that much. The next three books I'm going to hit on, and then we'll talk themes and overarching trends throughout the year. The Barn by Wright Thompson was a deep, dense, heavy book. I'm pretty sure this one was recommended by Sophie Hudson, who was on the podcast earlier this year. Sophie recommended it. The Barn is an incredible story of the history and legacy of the site of where Emmett Till was murdered in Mississippi. And Wright Thompson is a sports writer, but he wrote a history book. And so, really interesting perspective that Wright brings, and a great read to learn some of the deep, dark history of our country. Number 5, the fifth book I read from Trevor Moawad, It Takes What It Takes. Trevor was Russell Wilson's mindset coach before Trevor passed away a few years ago. Trevor talks about how neutral thinking, not positive, not negative, but neutral thinking helps us dial it in. This has been a pivotal reframe for me of some of the tools and work, what we teach and talk about with clients in terms of mindset, in terms of approach and feedback. This idea of neutral thinking in mental performance is really, really powerful. Number 6 was a recommendation from either Entrepreneur or Inc. magazine. They had a summary of Kevin Kelly's Irreplaceable. Kevin's an architect by trade, and he talks about the architecture, the experience of how his agency, Shook Kelly, works with brands to build a really high impact retail experience. It was a fascinating read. I've now recommended the book twice to friends in the apparel packaging industries. One friend I recommended Irreplaceable to, I actually gave him my copy. And a week later, he texted me and said, "Hey, I'm at a conference. You'll never guess who's on stage speaking. Kevin Kelly." So, really good read. Definitely a change of pace, but helps you to think about architecture. You may not know this about me. Back in high school, I wanted to be an architect. Went and visited one university here in Virginia, and they said, unfortunately, you wouldn't be able to play baseball and study architecture. And turns out by the time I went to college, I didn't do either one. All right, let's dive into some of the best stories of the year. If you know me, you know how much I enjoy Torchy's tacos. One time I walked into Torchy's this year, I saw they had a book on the counter for sale about Torchy's story. And so I picked that up from the library, read that. The Devil is in the Details. Mark Ripka, the founder of Torchy's, his story. And I'll draw the parallel to Shoe Dog, Phil Knight's story about the genesis and founding of Nike. You know, both, if you know me, you know both of those brands. I'm big fans of tacos and Nike. Those two stories help you to see the long journey and the long investment. If you walk into Torchy's today, you know you're going to get a good taco. If you walk into a Nike store or a Dick's and pick up a pair of shoes, sweatpants, you see Nike's apparel everywhere. You expect some level of performance from what you're picking up. But what you may not recognize is just how much work went into building that brand, building the company, and the long journey, sometimes volatile. Nike's journey was incredibly volatile. And so both of those stories, Shoe Dog is an older book, but I hadn't read it yet. Finally read it this year. And those two stories were especially impactful for me to hear those brand stories, hear what the founders were doing, and understand the challenges they faced as they built their businesses. There's one other book I read. Jim Lee recommended this one, Love as a Business Strategy. And what I thought was so fascinating about this was it was part leadership book, but it was part business story as well. It was part of Muhammad's story and the team in their company. Muhammad and his co authors dive into how they rebuilt the culture of their company, Softway, a software company with offices in the States and in India. The cultural dynamics they learned, the things they discovered along the way, and the challenges they faced and how they completely rebuilt that culture once they had their light bulb moment. Once they developed that sense of awareness and realized, hey, we have an issue and a challenge in our business. We've got to fix this. And so not only are they telling the story, but they have built their system and their approach to multiply that into others. It really parallels our work well. What we do, how we walk clients through Leaders Rising Network and our team, what we're doing with clients in creating bigger futures and building thriving cultures, Muhammad and his team did themselves in their own company. They bootstrapped it and figured it out. They rebuilt their company from the ground up. Once they did that, people started noticing and they started watching. And they asked Muhammad and his team to come share some of those insights. And so I love this because it's the intersection. It's not only a story, but it's a transformation journey. And they're now multiplying that similar to the way we multiply that into others. All right, let's shift gears slightly. One of the other categories, it wasn't a category of subject matter, but it was a category of authors. And that category of authors is friends. I read books, a number of books this year, probably a half dozen at least, who were either written by friends or friends of friends. And so knowing these authors, knowing the kind of people they are, who they are, and what they wrote and represented is really kind of cool to see their entire journey played out and to walk through the book, what they've written, and for some of them to hear their story interwoven with that. One particular that stands out, Patricia Bradby Moore, her book, Blackanese, about her background and upbringing, her story, and how that's translated into who she is today, how she positions herself and shows up on stage or when she's speaking, presenting, networking. She's really an incredible leader. She's been on the podcast talking about the power of her network and how that network has gotten her to where she is professionally today, and really enjoyed Patricia's book. Jessica, Jeremy, you've heard Jeremy on the podcast a few times in some of his earlier books, The Voice Driven Leader, his latest. One other new friend, I read two of Walter Crosby's books this year, which leads me into one of the last categories that is very surprising for me to think about. I would never have thought this would be a subject matter that I would spend and read so many books about, but that is in the category of sales. I love Walter's take on it because he's not antagonistic, but he's going to ask some tough questions. He's going to poke holes in the assumptions and expectations of how we have seen sales done because he wants to see his companies, his clients thrive. And so, two simple books and simple frameworks where Walter lays out what he does in terms of sales consulting and strategy. I love both of his. He really paints a clear picture of the structure, the process, and how to go about building your sales team. That's something we've been working on throughout this year, which then leads to two other authors, three actually. Number one, Marcus Sheridan. His latest book, Endless Customers, was a really great read this year and helped us frame up some strategy and goal setting that we did for our company. He was really pivotal, as was Mo Bunnell. Mo was really an accidental find this year. Something prompted me to go searching. This may have even been an AI search. And I came up with a list of books, started looking at a few options, and read one of Mo's books in a weekend. And then I read the second one. And then I went into the resources that he had available. And so the intersection of Marcus Sheridan and Mo Bunnell with Walter's steady presence and encouragement, those three paint a really powerful and compelling picture of how you can build a sales process that's sales as service, not sales as sleazy, as uncomfortable, but sales as what you want it to be, the kind of sales experience you would want to participate in as a buyer, as a spender. It helps you set the stage for that kind of environment yourself. I really enjoyed each of those. The last one, Ryan Serhant. Ryan's a real estate tycoon in New York City, the star of yet another Netflix series. I heard him just a few weeks ago on a podcast. I thought his take on leadership and the businesses he's building was really interesting. I had never heard of Ryan Serhant until 2 weeks ago. And since then, I've checked out his Netflix series, read two of his books. A third one's waiting for me at the library. Really interesting to hear just another perspective on how you build a brand, how you build that sales process in your business, and thinking about the habits. And really, this brings us full circle because the habits that Ryan talks about, the follow up, the follow through, the discipline, really goes back to where I started with Cal Newport and slow productivity. It's about the habits. And so if what you're reading isn't shifting or changing your mindset, I'd encourage you to stretch outside your comfort zone. I sure did this year. There were a couple memoirs, a couple books I didn't include in the list that I've pulled off the list. Some a little subject matter being not a popular take, not a widely accepted take. But those kinds of insights and perspectives help shape us into understanding the world around us. They may shift our perspective, they may give us another insight that we hadn't thought about, or they may help us fortify the foundation on where we're standing. No matter what the books do that you're reading, the important thing is to keep learning. We're in this continued growth and learning process. And honestly, it's exciting for me to look back over the year and think just how much I've read. Do I wish I had retained a little bit more? Do I remember every single one of the books I read? Some of them I don't. Some of them I remember the experience. I remember where I was sitting reading it. Others have specific takeaways that stand out and are etched in my mind. It's not so much about the process or the experience or what you do with the information, as long as you keep pressing forward, as long as you keep learning, growing, and as the fiction and memoirs did, take your foot off the gas periodically. Let the books you're reading give you a little bit of a downshift. And I'll wrap with some of the downshift for me. Two series Ryan Serhant was one that I've read books related to a series I've seen or something I've seen on TV. Also read um, a number of Reacher books. The Amazon Prime Video series is one of my favorite series to watch. And so translating that into the Reacher books is a great way to continue reading, but not feel like I'm working, but it's just a little bit of a brain break. That's what fiction and stories do. The last one I just found, Tracker on CBS, is another one of my favorite series. And I just finally, within the last few weeks, actually read the credits and saw inspired by a book, read a Tracker book, and those have been a great change of pace this year. One last book and one final experience that tied this together. Somebody recommended reading Zach Hempel's The Baseball. The Baseball walks through a history of the baseball, a Rawlings baseball used by professional baseball players, recreational Little League baseball players, college baseball players, all the way through. Why does the ball have the red stitches it has? How are these balls made? Hand stitched in Costa Rica, by the way. Where does the outside come from? How is the string put together? What's inside? And who decided how big the rubber ball would be in the middle? How much cork? How much string? All of those elements were part of the baseball, as well as Zach's story about how many baseballs he has collected. I've got a handful here in the office that I've collected, a few more up on the shelf commemorating specific events. A few weeks ago, I was in St. Louis and got to travel to the Rawlings Experience, where Rawlings has put now 30-foot gold glove on top of their headquarters building. And you walk through a little bit of the history of the baseball, a retail experience, and it includes some gold glove trophies from throughout the years, some memorabilia, as well as the latest and greatest bats, balls, gloves, helmets that Rawlings has on the market. But that was a fun full circle moment to have read the baseball, to understand what goes into every single baseball that ever goes into play, how much work goes into that, only to be discarded most of the time after just a few pitches in a major league game. Well, it's been a year of reading. How many books am I going to read next year? I honestly haven't decided. It'll be more than 6. It'll be less than 61, I'm sure. I would love to keep reading. I will probably slow down the pace. But as I mentioned, when I put that 2025 notes section together of books, tracked the 61 books I've read, and I have a long list of other books that people have recommended. There are some great books on that list that I just haven't been able to slot into the lineup yet. So who knows what the goal will be for next year, but rest assured, the point will remain the same. I'll be working to continue learning, to continue expanding my perspective on a wide array of subjects. And who knows, maybe I'll dive in more to Lean and Six Sigma and process optimization like I did this year. Maybe there will be something new I run across that I dive into. With books, you just never know. So I encourage you, check out the show notes, see the full list of books. If you want to pick up one of them, again, I highly recommend your local library. Ebooks, the Hoopla app was a huge lifesaver this year in terms of finding great books, and support your local bookseller. Find a bookstore, pick up the hard copy, hold it in your hands. There's nothing like that experience. Thanks for listening today. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the New Generation Leader podcast. Subscribe today on your podcasting platform. Download the show notes and unlock your true leadership potential at newgenerationleader.fm. Thanks for listening today, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the New Generation Leader podcast.